As an extra bonus at the end, I'm going to talk about the 5 things that you should ask during every interview. Go blank in your interviews. How do you answer a question when you haven't used the platform before? How do you display confidence and competence in answering these questions? I'm Chris Gamble. I'm a data engineering veteran of over 20 years, from massive corporations to small businesses, and from data analyst to director of data and analytics. I've seen it all. And I'm here to share my knowledge with you to help you launch your data career. So speaking of your career, let's discuss 5 of the top interview questions. First top data interview question: what is ETL and how does it work? So, as we've discussed in a previous video, ETL is extract, transform, and load. There's a few different concepts behind this, a few different directions you could take this. ETL is the methodology to pull data from its source, transform it so that it's in the format that you need it to be, and then load it into your data warehouse. You'll also see this a little bit, another variant of this, as ELT, where you're extracting data from the source, loading it into your database or your data warehouse, and then doing transformations before you move it to the next layer. There's something called a medallion methodology that we'll discuss on a future video. So, next interview question. Explain the difference between data warehouse and a data lake. A data warehouse stores structured data in table form from multiple sources for query and analysis, while a data lake stores unstructured and structured data and is easily scalable and able to handle large volumes of data without requiring it to be structured first. So think JSON, Parquet, XML, CSV, emails, PDFs. So data lake can store all that type of data where it's unstructured or semi-structured, while a data warehouse needs it to be structured first. Question 3, what is a CTE and when should you use it? A CTE is a common table expression. It's basically a subquery that's only rendered once for the query instance that you're running. So instead of creating multiple subqueries where you're having to render that data multiple times before your main queries run, you use a CTE. There's multiple reasons to use a CTE. There's something called a recursive CTE that helps tremendously when you're doing hierarchies for things like the hierarchy of the structure of a organization, or maybe products. Sometimes products will have a hierarchy. And so creating hierarchies with a recursive CTE is sometimes useful depending on how your data is structured. But a CTE is very similar to a subquery that you can reference multiple times without the overhead of having to recalculate it each time. 4th question, and this is a question I've been asked a lot during interviews. I was asked it at my Chase interview. I was asked it at one of my Amazon interviews. What is a Cartesian join, and when would you use it? A Cartesian join produces every possible combination of results between the selected tables. Generally, you're not going to use that. Generally, you don't want Cartesian joins. Usually, a Cartesian join is created when somebody's made an error. But one reason may be to create some test data. So if you need a large data set in order to do testing, some data science techniques, if you're creating some type of predictive modeling and you need a large data set to test with, then you could create a large data set by creating a Cartesian join. Another reason is if you have a specific result that you want to add to all of your records. So I did intentionally create a Cartesian join recently. I was creating a notification system for our errors, and so I created a Cartesian join for our default emails so that I could do a coalesce on the default email if the wanted solution was not there. So if it was a new error, then it would spit out the default email. Also important to know here is a Cartesian join is also called a cross join. The last question for today. Do you have experience with XYZ ETL tool or XYZ any tool? I've been in several situations where over the years where a certain tool or a certain skill was needed and I didn't have it yet. It wasn't something that I had actively done within my profession. There were a couple cases where I'd performed that skill or used that tool in schooling when I went for my master's degree, or I played with it, for a project, but I hadn't used it professionally yet. So don't be afraid to say during an interview, I've not used that tool, but I've went out and I've looked at some trainings for it. I've gotten a demo for it, and so that I am familiar with it. And, that shows initiative, that shows, some leadership and some honesty, right? Of, hey, I don't have this. I know I can do it. It's familiar. It's similar to these other tools that I use. And I've looked it up online and I've started to gain some knowledge about it. That in and of itself may get you the job. So even if you don't know, be honest about it, and then go out and find information about whatever it is before the interview, so that you're prepared to say that during the interview. I also want to talk about the 5 things that you should ask during an interview. So let's get into it. 1, what is your biggest project over the next 6 months? This shows your interest in the company as well as some initiative to understand it. And a lot of times you could provide some input or feedback for that project based on your own skills. 2, what is your favorite thing about working at this company? That's important to ask because remember, they're not only interviewing you, but you're interviewing them. Is this a place that you want to work? And by asking that question, you'll understand a little bit more about the culture and what the high points are of the company. 3, what is the most important thing in a peer or an applicant for this role? So that's important to know because a lot of times at that point, if you haven't already displayed it, you can make sure that you've displayed that skill or that knowledge or show that you have initiative to learn it. 4, what created this opening? It's important to know what created the opening. They might not always be upfront with you on the reason for the opening, but it might give you some insight as to, again, what the atmosphere is in the job role and in the team, as well as the company itself. And finally, 5, when do you plan to make a decision? This again shows your eagerness and desire to get the job, as well as provide you with some insight as to what the timeline may be going forward. So those are 5 interview questions and 5 things that you should ask on every interview. I hope that prepares you for your next interview. If you're interested in learning more about data engineering concepts, be sure to check out this playlist. And if you're interested in starting your journey with SQL, be sure to check out this playlist. If you learned something today, be sure to like and subscribe. So be sure to come back and let me know how your interview went, and I'll talk to you later.